Abu Sufyan bin Harb told him, Heraclius was sent to him with a group of Quraysh, who were merchants in sheep during the period during which the messenger of God, may God bless him and grant him peace, visited Abu Sufyan. And the infidels of Quraysh, so they brought him while they were with Ilya, so he summoned them to his assembly, and the great Romans surrounded him. Then he summoned them. He called his interpreter and said, Which of you is closest in lineage to this man who claims to be a prophet? Abu Sufyan said, So I said, I am the closest of them in lineage. He said, Bring him closer to me, and bring his companions closer, and put them at his back. Then he said to his interpreter, Tell them that I am asking this about this man. If he tells me a lie, then they will deny him. By God, if it were not for the shame that they would influence me with a lie, I would have lied about him. Then the first thing he asked me about him was, How is his lineage among you? I said, He is among us a relative. He said, Has any of you ever said this before him? I said no. He said, Was any of his forefathers a king? I said, No. He said, Do the nobles of the people follow him, or do the weak among them? So I said, Rather, they're weak. He said, Will they increase or decrease? I said, Rather, they increase. He said, Will any of them backslide out of discontent with his religion after he enters it? I said no. He said, Were you accusing him of lying before he said what he said? I said no. He said, Does he betray? I said, No, and we are with him for a period of time in which we do not know what he will do. He said, I was not able to say a word in which I could include anything other than this word. He said, So did you fight him? I said yes. He said, How was your fight with him? I said, The war between us and him is a dispute, he harms us and we harm him. He said, What does he command you? I said, He says, Worship God alone and do not associate anything with him, and abandon what your fathers say, and he commands us to pray, to give zakat, to tell the truth, to chastity, and to uphold ties. So he said to the translator, Tell him, I asked you about his lineage, and you mentioned that he is of lineage among you. Likewise, messengers are sent in the lineage of her people. I asked you whether any of you had said this, and you said no, so I said, If someone had said this before him, I would have said, A man following a statement that was said before him. I asked you whether one of his fathers was a king, and you said no. I said if he was one of his fathers a king. I said a man seeking his father's kingdom. I asked you, were you accusing him of lying? Before he said what he said, I mentioned that no, because I knew that he would not have lied to me. People and lies about God. I asked you whether the noble people followed him or the weak ones, and you mentioned that the weak ones followed him, and they were the followers of the messengers. I asked you whether they would increase or decrease, and you mentioned that they would increase, and so is the matter of faith until it is completed. I asked you whether someone would backslide out of dissatisfaction with his religion after he entered it, and you said no, and the same applies to faith when it mixes with hearts. I asked you whether he betrays, and you said no, and likewise messengers do not betray. I asked you what he commands you, and you mentioned that he commands you to worship God and not associate anything with him, and he forbids you to worship idols, and he commands you to pray, to be truthful, and to be chaste. Indeed, he will possess the place of these feet of mine, and I knew that he was without. I did not think that he was one of you, for if I had known if I were sincere to him, I would be eager to meet him, and if I were with him, I would wash his feet. Then he called for the letter of the messenger of God, may God bless him and grant him peace, which Dihia had sent to the great of Basra. So he gave it to Heraclius, who read it, and behold, in it was in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, from Muhammad Abd God and his messenger to Heraclius, the great of Rome, peace be upon whoever follows guidance. As for what follows, I invite you. Under the pretext of Islam, submit and submit. May God reward you twice. If you turn back, then upon you is the sin of the Orisons. And, O people of the book, come to a common word between us and you. That we worship none but God, nor associate anything with him, nor take others as lords besides God. But if they turn away, then say, bear witness that Muslims, Abu Sufyan said, when he said what he said, and finished reading the book, the noise increased and the voices rose and we were taken out, so I said to my companions when we were taken out, the matter of Ibn Abi Kabsha has become very bad. The king of Banu al-Asfar fears him. I was still certain that it would appear until God brought Islam to me. Ibn al-Nadir, the companion of Elia and Heraclius, was a bishop among the Christians of the Levant. He said that when Heraclius came to Elia, one day he became evil-minded. Some of the men said, we have deplored your appearance. Ibn al-Nadir said, and Heraclius was mourning and looking at the stars, and he said to them when they asked him, I saw tonight when I looked in the stars, the king of circumcision has appeared. Who among this nation is circumcised? They said, only Jews are circumcised, so do not worry about them, but write to your king Midian, and they will kill the Jews among them. While they were doing their job, a man was brought to Heraclius who was sent by the king of Ghassan to inform about the news of the messenger of God. May God bless him and grant him peace. When Heraclius informed him, he said, Go, for they were not sure whether he was circumcised or not, so they looked at him and told him that he was circumcised. He asked him about the Arabs, and he said, They are circumcised. Heraclius said, This is the king of this nation has appeared. Then Heraclius wrote to a friend of his in Rome, who was his equal in knowledge, and Heraclius walked to Homs, and did not leave Homs until a letter came to him from his friend who agreed with Heraclius' opinion. Upon the emergence of the prophet, may God's prayers and peace be upon him, and that he was a prophet, Heraclius authorized the Roman leaders to attack him in Homs, then he ordered its doors to be closed, then he came out and said, O people of the Romans, do you have the right to prosperity and maturity, and for your kingdom to be established, so that you pledge allegiance to this prophet? So they hunted the wild asses to the gates, and found them closed. When Heraclius saw their flight, and he despaired of faith, he said, Return them to me, and he said, I have said my word. Just now, I was trying to test your strength in your religion, as I saw, and they prostrated to him and were satisfied with him, and that was the last matter of Heraclius.